What happens when law, business, and life collide? Each week on Lead Counsel, your host Tom Tona will take a deep dive into topics related to the law, the business of law, and life. There will be insightful discussions with industry insiders, experts, and thought leaders making significant contributions and meaningful differences in their fields of expertise. Tom is the founder and managing attorney at TonaLaw. He has been a practicing attorney since 1994 and the leader of TonaLaw since it opened in 2001. The goal of this podcast is to provide you with free information on law and the business of law, and to give you actionable tools related to each of these areas. Now, here's Tom.
All right. Welcome back to the Lead Counsel podcast, everybody. I'm your co-host, Juliet, and I'm joined today by Mr. Tom Tona, Mr. TonaLaw himself. How you doing, Tom?
What's up, Jules? You gonna explain to everybody what the hell's going on in this alternate universe?
First, can you do like a little fun intro from,
Oh, we're reversing roles. You want to tell people what we're doing first?
Yeah, so today we're talking to Cranky Tom. And fun fact, every time you talk to Tom, he's cranky. I mean, the way he likes to say salty. So I hope everybody likes their salt, because we're bringing it today.
Oh, so it's going to be like that, huh? So we're in alternate universe where Jules is taking over the podcast, everybody. So I hope you can stand what's about to go down, because it ain't going to be pretty. But we're going to deliver value like we always do.
That's right. That is right. I hope you guys can stand to listen to us for longer than 20 minutes. And let's get rolling.
Let's get rolling.
All right. So if you know Tom, you know he posts a lot on LinkedIn. He's very, very consistent on that site, and he kills it. His analytics, you guys wouldn't even believe. But today, the topic of the podcast is going to be one of his recent posts about fear and failure and how fear plays a role in your dreams. He was inspired by the quote from Susie Kassem. Is that how I say it? Susie Kassem?
Yeah, that's it.
So he was inspired by the quote from Susie Kassem: "Fear kills more dreams than failure ever will." And I think there's like a second part to the quote, but that's what we're focusing on today. So, Tom, let's get rolling. All right.
Let's get rolling. Let's go. I'm ready.
First, I want to know what inspired the LinkedIn post. Like, I know you like this quote, but what made you put this out?
Sure. So I was in a coaching call or a pre-coaching call with someone, and the topic kept coming up: fear. Mentioned 4 or 5 times: fear, 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 and fear. And it got me thinking about rooms that I'm in, right? Mastermind rooms specifically. I just came home from one, and there's a lot of people that are driven by or repelled by or impacted by fear, right? Everybody feels fear. A lot of entrepreneurs, it's really common. And as you level from, let's say, you just hang a shingle, you were making a comfortable 6 figures at a job, and you decide you're going to open up your own practice, there's going to be fear there. But it's different at every level. It's different when you're at 150,000 and then you go to 750,000, or you go to 3 million, right? The fear changes, but there's always fear. So it really got me thinking about just how much fear impacts not just entrepreneurs, professionals in general, and the ones that are crippled by fear and the ones that embrace fear, deal with the fear, and do it anyway. Mm-hmm. So that's what's behind the motivation for it.
That's a great way to put it. And I think you're right. I think no matter who you are, what position you're in, fear is always a factor. Even in like your personal day-to-day, I think fear holds a lot of people back. So in your opinion, like, where do you think that fear stems from when it comes to your professional growth? Where do you think the fear stems from?
I think almost everything. So it's funny, man. I was in a really accomplished room this past week, really accomplished.
Yeah, you had a big week with a really big group, right?
Yeah, with this
A
mastermind.
small group of big players.
Correct. A small group of big
big
players. So you had, multiple 7-figure earners, 8-figure earners, multiple 8-figure earners, all in a really small closed group facilitated by a really skilled facilitator. And I'm purposely not mentioning it because it's closed. It's done. It's full. There's no room for new members. But the interesting thing about it, and it's all confidential, but the interesting thing about it is how deep-seated childhood impressions remain.
Yeah.
Right? So like just on a personal level, I always joke around about, somebody having mommy issues or daddy issues and the stuff that happens to us as kids follows us. We talked about it even with you, right?
Yeah.
Right.
No,
and the impact of things that you saw as a kid that have impacted the way you see things now. So it's really common, and it's surprising that it just doesn't change. And I'm talking about crazy, multiple 7-8-figure earners that still deal with this stuff well into our 50s. And I'll get real with you. Like if you, as real as you want to deep dive, whatever questions you're asking me, if you're willing to answer the same questions, I'll go deep with you in this podcast.
Yeah, sure. I think you're right. Like a lot of it does stem from childhood. And it's funny because when you mentioned that, I thought of Gary Vee, because obviously I think we both follow Gary Vee. Well, I know you do. Absolutely. We've read a couple of his books, but he always says in a lot of his speeches and his podcasts, like the reason he doesn't let his fear stop him is because he grew up with like a mom who told him you can do anything. And he says how she said it repeatedly. So it's things like that that can really mold you into like the adult you are. So I think if people grew up and didn't have a support like that can also tie a lot into the fear that you feel as an adult.
Yeah, 100%. 100%. I think that so some of us persisted despite the fear that might have been instilled or insecurity that might have been instilled. And it's about quieting that childhood voice that was telling you weren't good enough to somebody who's a multiple 7-figure earner, right? Or anything along those lines. It's the more accomplished people have gotten there despite that voice.
Yeah. I mean, it depends on the person,
And by that voice, I mean the inner voice. There's not an actual voice, meaning the inner voice of the things in your head that are not accurate. It's not accurate.
If you have actual voices in your head, you should get that checked.
Well, I'm wondering that about you, but so look, fear is that emotion that you feel when you're walking into an uncertain scenario. So I can give you a very visceral feeling for any of the attorneys that might listen to this.
Okay.
My first week into a job that I knew nothing about personal injury, I get a trial put on my desk. I feel fear. I go, what the like, what am I supposed to do with this? I'm not a trial lawyer yet. I got a file put on my desk. And it was different back then. It wasn't like the generations right now. And I hate saying that because I know I sound like my father, but it wasn't like, oh, Jules, you're a new attorney. I'm going to let you learn how to be a trial lawyer by studying and by following me around. No, you got files put on your desk to try. A lot of men and women in their 50s learned the same way, and they will all tell you the same thing. It was the best thing that could have happened. Now we're in a different time generationally where a lot of the Gen Z or the newer generation of lawyers, they want hands-on coaching, hands-on mentoring, all of that stuff. We didn't get that, but what it allowed us to do was learn how to be trial attorneys right out of the gate. And then you could perfect it as you went along. So I walked into court on my first trial terrified. And I did it anyway. And I probably made a lot of mistakes. I don't remember because it was like 25 years ago, but I did it anyway. And on the other side of that was like a love for the trial, a love for the outcome of a jury verdict. That is the most stressful thing, and your heart's pounding and the adrenaline is flowing. That's fear. And so it comes from inside. There is a psychological and physiological cascade that happens. And it really comes from, I think, your brain, right? I think it's rooted in the deep recesses of your brain where unfamiliar feels unsafe, unsafe feels like potential death. And we are hardwired for preservation in our brains. So fear is rooted in our genes. It's a survival mechanism, right? And you just said something that you thought you were going to edit out. I wouldn't edit it out. You ride a motorcycle. You're a biker.
Yeah.
Okay. You said the day, and there's a saying, the day you stop fearing your bike is the day you crash.
Yeah. In my class, my license class, they told us the day you get on the bike and you're not afraid is the day that you're going to f up and crash, because you're not being present in the moment and like focusing on what it is that you're doing. Like you're literally riding nothing, basically.
You're riding a death machine. Yes.
A death machine.
But look, there's something to this. So like, let's stick with it. You could edit whatever you want, but so our genes, our actual genetic material is encoded so that it keeps us alive long enough to procreate, right? Like, so when you were a caveman, your genes were designed to allow you to procreate, pass on your genetic material. So you felt fear so that rustling in the bushes didn't turn out to be a saber-toothed tiger that literally ate your head off.
Yeah.
Okay.
How were those times for you?
Fear is rooted in our genes all the way back to caveman times. And it's also where judgment comes from, right? People are inherently judgmental, which you have to overcome that urge now that we're no longer in caveman times, right? Mm-hmm. So the reason you're judgmental is you automatically form opinions of, is somebody like you or different from you? And you do that as a survival mechanism. Again, rooted into our genes. What you have to do is, hopefully people in society have evolved to be conscious and aware of that judgment as an irrational reaction to a genetic encoding of fear.
Yeah.
Right. So I think that the nature of fear is deep-seated psychologically, genetically, as a survival mechanism. That's what it is. But you can have hyper responses that are not real. And you will never grow personally or professionally if you do not embrace your fear and persist despite your fear.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And fear and judgment, it's all a reaction to the unknown, essentially, right? Like, that's really what it is. Like you've said, like, you don't know what the future is going to bring, so you get scared of it.
Well, because the future's scary, and in the subconscious recesses of your brain, that can feel like, oh my God, death could happen. Mm-hmm. Right. So if you play it safe, it'll feel more comfortable, but you're not going to achieve greatness. You're not going to grow. You're not going to leave a lasting impact on anything or anybody. You have to be willing to persist despite fear.
Yep. So can you share a moment in your career where fear like almost held you back from something? Like, do you remember an experience like facing your fears and where it almost held you back, but it paid off in ways that like you were like, thank God I didn't listen to that voice?
Yes. So I can give you dozens of examples of time. Look, part of one. All right. One good one is the day that my mentor dropped the file on my desk and said I was on trial the next week. I actually was like, maybe I should just quit. Right. Yeah. And I would have never gone into personal injury. I would have never tried a case. I would have never then developed into a business person that I am now, because becoming a great technician allowed me to then become a business person. So like that is my earliest memory of terror, fear, pure terror of walking in front of a jury for jury selection, a jury pool we walked in front of. I had to pick a jury. I wanted to vomit in the bathroom. And every time I was on trial after that, I used to go into the bathroom right before jury selection, and I was going to be physically sick from the emotional response my body was having. I would splash cold water on my face, take a couple of deep breaths, be nauseous, but go in and do it anyway.
Wow.
How about you? How about you?
How do I work through fear?
Well, first of all, give me an example of like, a recent bout with fear where you had to overcome it to get to what the next level of what you wanted was.
Actually, I do have one. So recently we brought on an FCMO, and his name is Seth. He's great. Shout out Seth.
He's coming on the show, hopefully.
I know. You should set that up when you see him in 2 weeks. But anyway.
Well, you should set it up because you take care of scheduling guests.
Oh my God. It's like a nightmare. Anyway. So recently we hired an FCMO. His name is Seth. He's great. But when we were discussing the fact of bringing on a fractional certified marketing?
No, fractional chief marketing officer.
Okay. So when we first talked about bringing on a fractional chief marketing officer or any sort of marketing position above me, it truthfully scared me because I was like, oh my God, is Tom trying to push me out? Like, this is, we built this department together. And I think I was just nervous it was like a fear of being replaced almost, right? But as he's come on and as we work together, like, it is absolutely not like that at all. He's literally there just to help us be organized and move projects along. And I've been learning so much from him, and I'm so grateful for that. So that's definitely going to really bring our marketing efforts through the roof, as well as like my marketing knowledge too.
Which, by the way, didn't I tell you when I was hiring that I was doing it for you? As much as for the business or for me, I had to get myself out of the silo, right? So stick with that for one more second. It would almost be a fear of, would you call it a fear of rejection or a fear of failure? Like, how would you categorize that fear that you were feeling?
I feel like it would be a fear of, I don't want to say
fear of the unknown. What about fear of the unknown?
Fear of the unknown, and a fear of like almost like, oh, will Tom not need me anymore kind of thing. I was like, oh my God, like, I'm getting pushed, like, I'm not doing good. Tom feels like he needs to bring somebody else in. So that's where it was rooted in. But
again, so maybe that's an insecurity, which is a form of fear, right? Like fear of losing your job, or fear of position, fear of losing your position in life that you had accomplished and you were so proud of. Is that fair?
Yeah, no.
So, but here's the crazy part of that, right? This is why fear is so crazy. Fear is a liar. Yeah. Fear is your
big,
brain.
Fat liar.
Yeah, and fear is fear is your brain and your body telling you something despite the truth. Yeah. Like I literally said to you, Jules, I've made a decision at the end of last year. I'm signing a contract with a fractional CMO driven by the following things. I am at a cap of what I know about marketing. I need to give you more leadership in marketing, more skills in marketing, more experience in marketing. So I'm doing this move as much as for you as for the business. Yeah. And despite that, your brain, your body, your emotions all told you, hey, Jules, you need to be very scared. Death is coming. Death of your concept of self, or death of your career, or whatever. And dude, I think I beg you every day, like, hey man, let's make sure you're content, you're happy, you feel fulfilled. I want you here a long time.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I know. I recognize it was just fear.
But isn't
Listen,
it crazy the way it works?
Oh my God, you're right. It's like a whole, just like, it's like a whole body reaction. That's it. It really is. So you hit it on the nail with that. So actually, perfect instance. How would you differentiate rational and irrational fear? Because that was obviously like on my part an irrational fear, but I'm like, it's very telling of my personality. But anyway.
You were about to say, I'm always irrationally fearful.
I'm always irrational.
You're the best, Jules, by the way. Like, you have a really special disc. So, like, I'll take your funny irrationalities or whatever it is and still work with it because you know me. Like, I get crazy when people are, like, overly irrational.
Like I said, salty.
That does not make me salty. That makes me spread thin. Impatient, maybe. But listen, with you, I feel like I am pretty patient because I think that, you know, you're special, your talents are special, your dedication is special. So like you do really great stuff. So
thanks.
To answer your question about how do you differentiate between rational and irrational fear? You know, you sit down and you go, well, how many times have I felt this before and it's never come true?
Yeah.
Right. And if fear reaches, I think, a clinical level, it can manifest as like anxiety. Mm-hmm. Right. And we know tons of people that suffer from anxiety, and it's not something I would ever joke around about. But I think, you know, the way I differentiate between rational and irrational is I meditate a lot. Mm-hmm. So like when you sit with your eyes closed, you can analyze the things you're afraid of. You can feel your emotions, let them pass through you, and you're taking kind of what I like as a mechanism is you pretend you're like floating above, and you go, okay, I feel this thing. Is it rational or irrational? Right? So like if someone grabbed your wrist and there's a hot stove with a flame open and you felt them pulling it towards it, like they were going to force your hand over that flame, the fear is rational and it would cause you to react. But if you hear a rustling in the bushes today, did you think there's a saber-toothed tiger there?
No.
Right. But it's all contextual as well. If you were a cave woman back in the day, picking up acorns or whatever cave women did to feed the family, and you heard a rustling in the bushes, you might slowly walk back to the cave because that might be rational in that context. Mm-hmm. So I think context plays a lot into it. And what I like to do is sit with my emotions and ask the questions. Is it rational? Is it irrational? Have I been here before? Have I been here so many times before and 95% of the time nothing bad has happened? Mm-hmm. Right? It's not that I don't feel fear. It's that I now am very capable of analyzing it, feeling it, processing it, and moving despite it.
Yeah. And you know yourself. That's the point of the meditation, which by the way, you'd be proud. I meditated twice this week.
Nice. I am proud. So I'm wearing you down, even though I don't want it to sound like I'm forcing you to do it, but I really think like, listen, it just, I made a comment to a coach today, right? I was like, I figured out what I want to be when I grow up. I'm a serial entrepreneur. And he was like, he goes, dude, this is our most impactful call in the last 10 years.
Oh, I love Patrick said that. Sorry.
Yeah.
Sorry. Shout out. Patrick.
He said, this is the most, but here's why. I know what I'm supposed to do, right? I know what I was born to do. I know what I'm great at. And so to be an entrepreneur, let's talk about that, tie that into what we do with the podcast. You better get real comfortable with fear. Otherwise, you can be a solo, right? I know people that are afraid of all different things. You cannot grow a business if you cannot process, control, and cope with fear at every level. Mm-hmm. And it doesn't get easier when you make more money or revenue. It gets
worse.
It gets worse because there's more at stake.
Yeah.
You can't be afraid of making mistakes. You can be afraid of it, but you gotta be willing to do it anyway. And I think it's a matter of trusting your skill set, right? Because that could be you can have a rational fear of making a mistake. You still have to make decisions, and some of them are going to be wrong, which means you made a mistake. What you want to do is be able to say, do I trust my skill set enough and my people enough at the next level, my team, to make mistakes, fix them, and move on and learn from those mistakes? I'll share another story.
Share one.
I was asked to figure out what the business is, right? What business are we in through the EOS process? And in the last quarter of this year, a lot of people felt a lot of fear because we had changed so many things. People don't like change. Again, it feels like death. Change is equated with death for a lot of people subconsciously. Every day you come to work, you have certain people there, and any change feels like death. Could be around the corner for your ego, for who you are, right? So instead of, having a highly profitable year, I sunk a lot of years, time, and money into the vision of the firm. And I went in deep, lots of zeros deep. And I got proof of concept first quarter. But it was a rough 90 days at the end of the year when I said, look, I got to go all in on this vision, right? And so I am better at dealing with my own concerns / emotions when it comes to those kinds of risks, because I've been here before. But even people that are on my team were feeling intense levels of fear, intense levels at the highest levels in my team. So they exhaled once the first quarter came and we had proof of concept, right? But you can't achieve great things without being okay, being scared, and doing it anyway. So like the vision and the mission of the firm, that's what allowed me to say, look, these playing small, playing safe, that's a way bigger risk to me than seeing my dream to fruition, seeing my vision to fruition, right?
Yeah.
So what's one of your dreams that scares you? You didn't think I wasn't going to ask hard questions, did you?
Oh, okay. A dream of mine. All right. Well, one of them, I'm working towards it right now. I love running, and I would call myself a runner. So at the end of last year, I signed up for a marathon because I've already done a half marathon. And at the half marathon, I said to myself, I was like, I'll probably never run a full marathon. But I was like, why not? Like, what is holding me back from doing it? And I love the training. I love going through that like tough period of just having to continuously push yourself by yourself. So I was like, I'm signing up for a marathon. So that's one dream that's going to come through because I'm going to run that marathon.
So let me ask you a question. Did you ever read the book Mindset by Carol Dweck?
I did.
So like what would have that limiting belief in your head of to me, I don't think that way, right? Like when I signed up at 38 to go into jiu-jitsu, I knew my life goal was to be a black belt, and I knew that was insane. And I knew I was old for the starting of that sport, that martial art, but it never dawned on me that I couldn't do it. Like I don't have that mindset. So I'm just curious about you, like, that initial thought of I'll never run a 26-mile marathon, when it comes into your head, do you know where that's from?
I think like in that certain aspect, it's not necessarily that I thought I couldn't do it. It's just I was like it was scary. Like I was finishing my half marathon and I was like, oh my God, imagine having to run this again. But again, like I only trained for the half. Like I had a different training schedule. I was in a different headspace then than I am now. Like now I'm like, okay, I'm ready for the training. Like I'm ready for the long hours to put into it because I want it to happen.
You
But
know,
then,
you're bringing up a good point. I'm sorry to interrupt you for a
no,
second.
it's okay. Go ahead.
Have you considered a coach, a running coach?
Yeah, I actually I use my aunt and her wife because they run marathons a
Okay.
lot. So I've been using them as kind of like a soundboard just to be like.
So, because that's
I'm doing
interesting.
this.
Like you asked me like, hey, how do you cope with your fear or whatever? It's one of the key tools for me is coaching,
Yeah.
right? Because a coach very oftentimes will prod you past fear.
Mhm.
Will paint a picture of your current status quo and make you real uncomfortable with not breaking through and facing your fears
Mhm.
with questions and analysis. And a lot of times the coach is going to say, well, what's the worst? Like my thought process to you is like, what's the worst that happens if you don't make the full marathon? Why would you ever put that limit on yourself? What if you do it?
Yeah, no, and I will.
You
Absolutely.
know?
Yeah,
So
no,
that's
I'm
awesome
ready.
that you're
I'm
going
gonna
to
be
your
ready
aunt.
for it. Yeah, they're very helpful.
People are either motivated by the carrot or the stick, right? They're either running towards something or running away from something. That's what I find.
Yeah.
And again, I'm no shrink. I'm definitely no guru with any of this stuff. But what I often ask myself is like, what am I afraid of in this decision? Right? Like when you say to you, how do you do it despite it? Or how do I cope with fear? I just say, well, what's the alternative? What does the alternative look like? Could I live with myself if I did not take this risk?
Yeah.
And almost always my answer is no, because at the end of the day, you can't take any of this stuff with you.
Yep.
Nothing. None of it really matters when you're dead, other than to your surviving family, friends, and people that you know. So which will you regret more on your deathbed? Doing it or not doing it and staying safe? To me, that's a simple equation.
I'm sure most people would agree with you is the not doing it.
Yeah, I'm motivated more by the fear of saying, yeah, I didn't do this. I played it safe.
Mm-hmm.
Like that's just something I would choke on that before I could ever not move forward just because of fear. That doesn't mean I move forward with everything, right? I analyze stuff, but if I feel that emotion and that's the primary thing that's keeping me back, that I can't deal with.
In the beginning, you talked about a potential coaching client of yours repeatedly saying that they were fearful of things. So,
Right.
like, what do you say to young professionals who are battling with a lot of fear?
Okay. Face your fears.
Mm-hmm.
Face your fears. First of all, I think anybody who can afford to should have a coach. And I mean, it can be a professional coach, somebody who's in the space, somebody who's done what they want to do. It can be an industrial psych. It can be a psychologist. They're coaches, man. They're coaches. I'm not a life coach. I don't know about the science behind life coaching. It's probably a thing, so I don't want people
It is.
blowing me up.
It is, I think, yeah.
Well, look, if I'm going to somebody, I want them to be a therapist or somebody who's doing or have done what I want to do or have plans to do.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. If you want to make $1 million by the time you're a certain age, talk to somebody who made $1 million.
Yeah.
By a certain age, right? They may tell you things you don't like to hear, but they can tell you with authority, right? So what I would say to anybody battling fear in their professional growth, personal, it kind of applies across the board. Face your fears. Face your fears and take a step in moving forward one way or the other. Maybe your fear is rational and you shouldn't move forward, but analyze it in an unemotional and rational way. Mm-hmm. Enlist outside help. If you were to come to me, and again, we have a kind of a special relationship because I know you for so long, etc. You were to come to me and say, and I've had other people I have that relationship with in the office and say, can you look at what I'm doing right now and tell me if I'm on the right track? I'm a little afraid or whatever. Yeah. And again, I'm not the be all end all of any of that stuff, but I can definitely give an unemotional analysis. That's what I started out as an attorney doing, was helping people in crisis. So people come to me for that. And I just kind of always applied that methodology. One, so I can give you action steps when you feel fear of every move you're making.
All right. Give us your top 5 action steps.
I don't know if I have 5, wise guy, but I have the following analysis, because people come to me in a very emotional state a lot of times for crisis management. It could be a severe personal injury case or a wrongful death case or a business crisis or anything like that. I always say first, let's make a list. And the list should be, tell me each and every issue that you have a feeling about right now. And by feeling, I mean like emotionally. What are you upset about? What are you angry about? What are you afraid of? So then we make a list. I'm like, okay, you got 10 issues here. Let's go through the list. Is item number 1 rational or irrational? And a lot of times it becomes very clear for people when I'm like, okay, you're upset that your neighbor's dog pooped on your lawn. Is that worth spending $10,000 on to have an attorney get involved to go after your neighbor for? And all of a sudden, it provides a different perspective to that emotion, right? Somebody comes to me like, hey, this guy took $200,000 as a loan and now he's not paying me back. That's a different analysis. You're right to have your certain concerns. Let's address outcomes. So like I approach it in a very systematic way. It starts with listing out your fears and then analyze them and maybe get help analyzing them, whether it's a therapist, an attorney, whatever it is, a friend, a trusted advisor. Everybody should have trusted advisors. Is this real? Is this not real? Is there a high risk or a low risk or almost non-existent risk? Right? And then you can make your decisions from there. And you can move forward freely on probably 80% of what was on that list. Because again, our brains, our physiological responses, they're hardwired for different things than what we're experiencing in today's world. That doesn't mean there's not shit you should be scared of. But in a business setting or career setting, you know, there's probably very little that you can do that is going to, you know, I shouldn't say be catastrophic, but again, I think that a lot of the biggest thing about fear is that most of the time it's so overblown in our heads and our hearts that it just paralyzes people.
Yeah.
If you look at people doing amazing things, no one knows what the f- they're really doing. No one is born great or born brilliant. You know, yeah, you pick up a ton of skills along the way if you're smart and you're paying attention and you're observing and you learn. If you're a lifelong learner, you can become great. But part of becoming great and doing great things is being able to face your fears and daring to move forward despite your fears.
All right. So everybody, you know the deal. That was just another episode from Tom and Jules on the Lead Counsel podcast. Please follow, leave us a 5-star rating, and share the show with your friends or anybody who you think would benefit.
And follow me on LinkedIn.
Thank you guys for tuning in, and we will catch you on the next one.
Peace.
Bye.